Okay, let's get started. So today we're going to be talking about creating queries. And again, I do mention from last week, I mentioned about creating tables and how to do that in Microsoft Access. So now we're going to work with creating queries. And what is a query? All it is a question to the database. It's asking the database to give you a specific set of information. So the key objectives for today are we're going to show you how to create a query, how to use the query design view, how to modify particular queries to get it to show what you'd like, how to sort and find data using a query, how to filter that data, and by filtering we're going to use the AND or the OR operator, and then how to format that data sheet to make it look appropriate. So creating a query. Again, all it is a query allows you to ask a question. And the information that it gives you is exactly what you ask for. It's not what you want, but it's what you ask for. So for instance, you can think of a query as a logical view of the data. If I were to ask for a particular set of information from a table, from the person's table, let's use that as an example, the person's table. If I were to say I want to have the first and last name of every person from the person's table, all it's doing is that query that I've just written goes to that particular table, the person's table, and pulls back the first and last name. Again, I could ask for social security number, I could ask for their date of birth, or I could ask for anything that's listed in the column headers, and it would display that back to us. But just keep that in mind. A query is a question. It allows us to view data at the smallest level. So one way in Microsoft Access to create a query is to use the simple query wizard. Now that wizard, just like last week when we talked about the table design wizard, it walks you through a series of questions that tailors the output to what you would like. Just like in the table portion, it tailors the questions to your needs, such as, do you want to order by first name, last name, choose your ordering sequence, choose the table you would like to pull from, what columns would you like to show in your query. All of those are different things that you can ask in a simple query wizard. Again, the simple query wizard is extremely easy. All you do is you go to create, and then you choose the query wizard right here. Once you do that, again, it pops up with that simple query wizard, which is the way that we would prefer to create our queries, at least for the first part, if you're not familiar with using the design view. Now, using the simple query wizard, like I mentioned earlier, allows us to use tables or other queries. I do need to mention that part. If we have saved queries that we've already written, we can use those to write other queries. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Kind of like I talked about last week, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Now, on the left-hand side, you'll notice the available fields, and on the right-hand side, you'll notice the selected fields. Again, the available and selected fields, all that means is the available fields are what you have available to choose from, while the selected fields are what you've chosen to show on your query. So those will appear in your query as fields. Now, before we go into using the query design view, I want to go ahead and open up an Access database and show you how to use the query wizard effectively. So give me one moment while I do that. Okay, now that we have this already created, we're going to look at the tables on the left-hand side. You'll notice in the object window here, we have three different tables. We have the agencies table, the agents table, and the listings table. We're going to take a look at the agencies table first. So I'm going to double click that and open it up. Now, remembering from last week, if you see the little expansion plus signs on the left-hand side, what that means is it has a relationship to another table. So if you click on that, it allows us to drill down farther or utilize the tables that are connected. Now, I can tell you based off of looking at this that it is joined to two different tables. The way I can tell that is it has two different expansions. But to show you that portion, all you have to do is to go to Database Tools and choose Relationships. Now we're looking at the agencies table. And if you'll notice, the agencies is tied to the agent, and the agent is tied to the listings. Agency to agents is a one-to-many relationship, like we talked about last week. And agents to listings is a one-to-many relationship. So reviewing from last week, a one-to-many relationship actually means that the agencies can have one or any number of different agents under their particular agency. And building on that, one agent can have many different listings. Okay, so now that we go back to this, let's hit close. We don't want to save that because we didn't make any changes. Now, putting that into perspective, looking at the agency, Three Lakes Realtors, has 4 different agents under their particular agency. Each agent, if we expand those out, has 2 different listings in their area. And hold on one moment. Okay, so looking at that, let's go ahead and build a query based off of this particular table. So let's go ahead and use that query design or query wizard that we talked about earlier. So let's go into Create, like we said earlier. And you'll remember last week we talked about the tables and how to use the table wizards or the table design. So now you'll notice the query wizard and query design. We'll talk about query design in a few moments, but for now we're going to go into the query wizard. Now, the first thing we're greeted with is a new query. We can choose one of 4 options: a simple query, a cross-tab query, and then there's 2 different ones, the find duplicates and the find unmatched query. We're not going to really go into the find unmatched or the find duplicates, but just know that they are options. The cross-tab query allows us to display data in a compact style, more like a spreadsheet, where the simple query allows us to just pick from basic fields, whether it is one table or multiple tables. We're going to choose the simple query wizard. And click OK. Now we're greeted with the wizard that I talked about earlier. From here, I'm going to choose the drop down for table queries. And you'll notice we have 3 tables and 2 different queries. We're going to choose agencies. And we're going to add or grab the agent's name, their number, and their phone number. So let's agency number, name, and phone number. Then we're going to choose next. After we chose our fields, we're going to go in and select the title or write the title of the particular list of information we chose. So we're going to call this one Agency List by Agents. Now we're greeted with another piece called two radio buttons. The radio buttons allow us to choose between opening the query in View Information, or we can open it in Design View. So we're going to go ahead and open the query and just show what we've got. So we're going to leave it by default, and we're going to choose Finish. And there we have it. We have the 4 different agents, numbers, the names of those agents' name, agency's name, and the agency phone number. So that's a master list, or a list by the agencies. Now, once we've created that query, we're going to go ahead and file and save. And now let's talk a little bit about the query design view. So the difference between the query wizard and the query design view is that design view allows us to edit existing queries. So the one that we just created, we can edit and add or remove different things from that. Also, if you are more familiar with the table structures that you've created, you can use the design view and create a query without going through the wizard. If you know the fields you'd like, and you know the tables you'd like to pull from, and the limiting factors that you'd like to limit the data by, all you have to use is the query design view. The query design view allows us to show multiple tables. Inside of the design view, which we'll talk about in just a second, or I'll show you, you'll notice that it shows the relationships tool, just like I showed you earlier. It'll show it again so that we'll know what we're dealing with. And it's very easy to get to. All you have to do is go over to the View section and click the Design View. Now let's go ahead and I'm going to show you how to do that. So we've got our query. We're going to go in and we're going to modify that particular query. So I was in the Create tab, so I'm going to choose the Home tab, and you'll notice the View section pops up. There's the Datasheet view, the SQL view, and the Design view. Right now we're in Datasheet view. Now SQL view stands for Structured Query Language view. That's not something that we're going to use, but I'm going to show that to you in just a moment after I explain the design view so that you'll know what we're doing. So let's go ahead and go into the design view. Oh, and another piece to the SQL view is once we've created everything in the design view or the datasheet view using the wizard, it actually does something in the back end of the database, where it creates it in the back end of the database in which Microsoft Access knows how to utilize it. And that's what that query SQL view is. And I'll show you that momentarily. Okay, so now we've got our agency table. You'll notice at the very top we have our results piece again. We have our run, which allows us to run the query if we choose. We can make a table if we'd like. We can append any record to an existing table, update a table, use a cross table set, delete a record or a table, or we can show the table. So if we hit show table, it pops up with the show table dialog box. Now we can choose the two that are not shown, which was agent and listing, and hit close. Now you'll see the relationship view like I was talking about earlier. Looks identical to the database table relationship view. But now we can actually use it. Now, looking at the field properties window at the very bottom here, let me explain a little bit about this. So at the very top, you see the field. What the field corresponds to is what we chose in the agencies table. You'll notice the next column down tells us the table in which we pulled from. Again, you'll see the agencies, the listing, and the agents table. We chose the agencies table. Then you'll notice at the very bottom here, before the little checkbox, is a sort feature. By default, again, by default, a query is always sorted in ascending order. Now, what's the difference in ascending and descending order? The difference is ascending order goes from A to Z and from 0 to 9, where descending order goes from Z to A and 9 to 0. And it only sorts based off of the first field or first column chosen by default. Now we can choose to sort information if we choose by choosing the ascending feature. We're not really going to be able to see a lot of the information because we've only got 4 different records to look at, but it'll give us a little more information. Then we can go into our criteria phase. The criteria piece allows us to add in the operators that I mentioned in the objectives, the and, the or the not. It allows us to limit our features. So let's say I want to limit the agency number to only see agency number 2. I want to filter and only see agency number 2. All I have to do is say equals 2. I chose that criteria and I put in equals 2. And now that we've done that, let's go ahead and save it and run. Okay, so what I did to get that one particular piece is I went into Design View, and instead of showing these two pieces, I removed those two. Because if you run it this way, you're going to get a list or a couple more that you don't need to see. And the reason we get these, or the multiple records, is because looking back at the design view, we're linking the agencies to the agents to the listing. So if we went and we looked at this particular table, looking at agency number 2, we have 3 different agents. And you'll notice we have different listings underneath, which is where all of our information shows. To put that into perspective, let's add another column to the design view to show what we're talking about. So let's add a multi-table query. So let's add in the agent's number and the listing number. And let's run that. So there you see why we have what we have. Why we had more than just one particular record showing. Because it showed the record for each agent and the listings they have. If we wanted to limit it just by that first agency, the agency number 2, what we would do is remove the agency number, or I'm sorry, the agent number and the listing number. Then we would remove any connection to the agency's table and run it again. And now you'll see we have just number 2. Does that make sense? Good. Okay, so going back to our PowerPoints, talked about modifying queries, the upper and the lower pane. The upper pane is that shows the field list and how we utilize the different tables. The lower pane shows the add, delete, and change features for the fields, which is what I showed you a few moments ago. Again, keeping with that, you'll notice the upper pane again shows the tables and the relationships, along with the lower pane, which shows the fields or the columns that we chose and any sort of sort or criteria that we chose to use. Looking at this specific photo or picture, you'll notice, or I'd like to point out, that this particular query is utilizing 2 different tables. It's utilizing the tours table to get all of the tour information, and then it's using the state table to pull in the name of the state where that particular tour is being offered. Again, after that, it is sorting the data that it's going to show in ascending order by the tour name. And then we're going to limit that data a little farther. We only want to show the state name that's in Colorado and that is an adventure tour. Let's actually look at that particular query. We can create this query on the fly. Give me 1 second to pull the database up and we'll go ahead and work on it. So now I have the Quest database. If you ever see the security warning, I forgot to mention that part, go ahead and enable the content so that you can modify it and mess with the system a little. We're going to go ahead and create, and we're not going to use the wizard. We're going to do this straight from Query Design View. So I'm going to choose Design View, and you'll notice States, Tour Categories, and Tours pops up. We're going to choose State and Tours. So I'm going to double-click State and double-click Tours, and then I'm going to click Close. I'm going to expand that window so we can see it. You'll notice now that the Tours table is linked to the States table because one state can have many different tours. So let's recreate this query. The first thing it was asking for was the tour name, so just double-click that. The next thing it was asking for was the start date, the duration, and the city. So we're going to choose the start date, the duration, the city. Then we're going to choose the state name from the states table. I double-click that, sorry. And the category from the tours table. Before we even limit the data, let's see exactly what we get. So we'll have a point of reference when we limit our data. So I'm going to go ahead and hit run. And you'll notice we have the tour names, we have our dates, the duration of the tour, the city, the state, and the category of which the tour is. Now let's go in and we're going to limit, we're going to sort first. I'm going to show you how to build this one by one. We're going to sort it in ascending order first. So let's go to View, Design View. We're going to take a look at the Sort feature and choose Ascending. And we're going to run that. You'll notice now it's in ascending order. A to 0, or 0 to 9, A to Z. Then we're going to go back to Design View. And the next thing it wanted us to do is limit the data by state name. And all we have to do is, anytime you're working with a string being anything other than a number, you have to put it in double quotes. So once you have double quotes, we're going to say state name is going to be Colorado. And we're going to save that or run it. Now we have Colorado. We're still sorted in ascending order, and we have every tour that's in Colorado. Now you'll notice that we have 6 different categories, or 6 different records with 2 distinct categories, adventure and family. So the next piece that we're going to add in is the category adventure as a criteria, which will remove the Rice Family Reunion. So we're going to go to View, Design View, and again, all we're doing is double quotes and adventure, and hit run. And you'll notice the Rice Family Reunion is now gone. Once you have the query the way you'd like it, we're going to save that. And we're just going to call this one Tours by, or Colorado Adventures. Let's call this Colorado Adventures. Colorado Adventures, and hit OK. Now you'll notice Colorado Adventure shows up on the left-hand side of our screen in our objects window. So now we can modify that or use it at a later date. Now talking about sorting and finding data. When you're sorting and finding data in a query, it works the exact same ways it does when you're sorting and finding data in a table. It allows you to sort by clicking on the list arrow in the datasheet view, datasheet view for the column heading. And that will sort it first off in ascending order. If you click it again, it'll go into descending order. Let me show you that really quickly. You'll notice in the right-hand corner, we have the sort orders. You can choose sort A to Z, Z to A, or you can choose to only show what you like. Let's sort in descending order. You'll notice it changed the entire look. Changing it back to ascending. So that's how you change the data. You'll notice now we're sorting with the duration, the city first, then by the duration, then by the tour name. So some of the key features and buttons that you'll see is the ascending, the descending, the clear all sorts, the find keyword, the replace, the go to, which allows you to go to a particular record, and then the select, which allows you to select a single record or multiple records, depending on what you would like. And all of those are right here. You have your ascending information, your descending information, your filter data to clear all your filters. You can use go to, find, replace, or select. Now, talking about filtering data. Filtering data allows us to show the data in different ways that we'd like to, but filters are not used to calculate anything, such as sums, averages, or counts. So you can't use those to count information, which I'm going to show you how to do that in just a few moments based off of the agency in the other database that we were looking at. So filters provide, in essence, a temporary way to display a small subset of data that we've returned with our queries. And you can also save that particular filter. So if you get the query the way you like it and you don't want to change it, all you have to do is save that particular query with the filters in place, and it will automatically show those anytime that query is run. Again, you can filter two different ways. One is by selection and one is by form. If you filter by selection, it's going to filter based on the fields that you've chosen and only the records with an exact match, where filtering by form allows you to filter a more comparative list, a larger subset of data, the whole record or record set that you pulled from. Keep that in mind. A selection is a small subset, where a form is a large subset of data. Then we're going to talk about wildcards. If you're ever working in the query design view and you don't know the specific information or the specific criteria that you'd like to sort on or to filter by, you can use what we call wildcards. Wildcards are anything, or are specifically a question mark or a asterisk. The question mark allows us to use a single character search, while the asterisk or the star allows us to search for any particular characters after that particular wildcard. Let's put that in place to show you exactly what I mean. Using the Quest database, we're going to remove our state in our category. We're going to remove our state in our category. And we're going to take a look at those. And we're only going to look at the states that have a M as the first character. Keep that in mind. Only the states that have an M for the first character. So the way you would do that is you go to View, Design View. We're going to be working with the state name field. Choose the criteria, double quote, capital M, the star key or asterisk, and end double quote. And click Run. Now you'll notice it gives you everything that has an M as the first character. We can even go a step farther, and we can go back to Design View, and we can add an I to the very end of that. So that's going to give us Missouri and Mississippi. So let's go ahead. So it's M asterisk I and run. Now that removed Massachusetts from what we were seeing. So now we only see the states from Missouri and Mississippi. Looking at the AND operator or the AND criteria, when you're messing with AND and OR criterias, remember these two specific pieces of information. The AND criteria means that every criteria must be true in order for it to show what it needs. When you're using the OR criteria, it can be either the first or the second criteria. Let's put that into perspective really quickly. Going back to our Quest and into our design view. Actually, let's pull up our Colorado. We're going to add in, we're going to leave the M star I. We're going to add in, let's see. Let's take this away so we can see what we're working with. We're going to choose cultural for the next part in our category. Keep that in mind, cultural. Design view. add that like back, and we're going to add cultural. Now you'll notice I did not add it to the line right next to the like. What I did was I added it to the or clause. What that means is either the M star I can be present, or it can be a category of cultural. Let me show you what I mean. Let's run that. You'll notice we get a lot more information, and the reason for that is we get our Missouri, we get our Mississippi. But you'll notice none of those have a category of cultural. But California and Florida do have a cultural category. So we get either Missouri for our M star I, or we get cultural. That's the or. Either one can be true. Going to the and operator, we'll move the cultural piece we'll move that to the and section. So it's got to be M star I, start with an M, end with an I, and be cultural. And click run. You'll notice we have nothing. Nothing shows. The reason is there's nothing cultural, or no category for cultural, in those particular states. We've added it back and click run. Now we're back to where we were. Okay, going back to our PowerPoints. Using the syntax criteria, I mentioned that a few moments ago, but let's go into it a little bit farther. Using the double quotes, like I mentioned earlier, or the quotation marks, you always have to use quotation marks when you're using a text value. I called it a string a few moments ago, but it's actually, for Microsoft's terms, it's called a text value. It's called a text value. And anytime you want to use a date field or a date criteria, you have to use a pound sign, or depending on your age, it could be a hashtag. For the sake of Microsoft Access, we're going to call it a pound sign. So when you're using a number, a currency, or a yes/no field, you don't have to surround those characters with anything. Let me keep that in mind for you. You do not have to assign any sort of currency or number or true-false value with any sort of character marking or criteria. Just the text and just the date. So remember that part. Now, if you're searching for blanks, if you know that you have data in your table, but you don't know if it's blank or not, you can use the two searching terms called is null and is not null. Now, the is null feature allows you to search for any record inside of that particular column that you specify that has no entry inside that record. For instance, if you leave your phone number blank in your person's table, you can search for any phone number that is blank in that particular table, and it's going to show it using the is null feature. Or if you know you have data inside of that column, you can use the is not null feature, which will remove anything that has a null value. And what is a null value? A null value actually means the absence of a value, meaning it's a placeholder in the table or in the record for something, but there's nothing there. It just has the potential to put something there if you choose. Keep that in mind as you're building your queries. So an example of the and the or criteria, we did go through this, and I showed you a few moments ago using the Colorado and adventure. I'll show that to you one more time. So we'll go back to Quest, to Design View. We'll choose Colorado and adventure and click Run. We'll see all adventures in Colorado. Again, Colorado and adventure are the two and criteria. Both have to be true in order for it to work properly. If one is false, it will not show it. Now we can also use comparison operators. The comparison operators, if you're a programmer or if you've ever used Microsoft Excel before, it's the exact same. The comparison operators such as greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, or less than or equal to. All of those are the same. The only difference when you're dealing with Microsoft Access is you have to put double quotes around it. Well, let me rephrase. In all Microsoft products, you have to put double quotes around it. Now, if you're thinking about going into programming and you're going to be a developer of some sort, there's another piece of information to the comparison operators I need to mention. Where you have the not equal to section, where the less than, greater than symbol are, right here, kind of looks like a diamond. There's another feature to the not equal to that other languages use, which is the exclamation point followed by the equal sign. And let's see if I can add that. Kind of like that. It's the exclamation point followed by the equal sign. So the OR operator, we mentioned the and, talking about the OR operator. The OR operator means any condition can be true and it will show the information. It doesn't have to be or, it doesn't have to be and, it can be or. For instance, and we're going to show this one next, we can have any tour that is greater than 7 days that has the state abbreviation of California and can either be educational or cultural. Let's add that in. Let me show you that one. We're going to show this one, California educational. So we're going to go back to our Quest database. We're going to create brand new query. Choose all three. Make this larger so we can see it. And we were going to choose the name, the duration, the abbreviation, and the category. So we're going to choose the name, the duration, the abbreviation, and the category. So we don't really need states, and we do not really need categories. So now we're going to choose, the state is going to be CA, and the category is going to be educational. Or the state is going to be CA, and cultural. So it can either be in California and educational or California and cultural. Now the duration is going to be greater than 7 days by default. And then we're going to add in a sort for ascending order. And click Run. So now we have any tour that is greater than 7 days in California that is either educational or cultural. And we're going to save that as California educational. Now, again, before we go into formatting our data sheet, let's talk a little bit about what I was going to mention earlier, which was the SQL view. Again, I mentioned the data sheet and the design view are what we use a lot of, but we don't actually look at the SQL view. So I want to take a moment and show you exactly that. Now, the SQL view kind of looks a little different, a little harder to read or harder to understand, but it's really not. You'll notice the very top here, highlighting that section, you have the select keyword. What the select actually means is that's what I'm asking the database to pull back for me. I'm asking it to pull the tour name, the duration, the abbreviation, and the category. No different than looking at the design view, it's just writing that out. Then it has to find, or you have to tell it which table in which you're going to pull it from. That's the from keyword, where you're pulling from the tours table. Now, the limiting criteria that we talked about earlier, the ands, the ors, the filters, is actually written out where tour duration is greater than 7 and the state abbreviation is California and the category is equal to educational. All of that is one criteria. All of that is one criteria. Then you have our second criteria, which is or. See the keyword or. The duration is greater than 7, and the state abbreviation is California, and the category is cultural. So we have our two specific criterias, and then our order, our sort. You can order by or sort by the category name, or the tour name, sorry. All of that is just written word for what you see right here. It's the exact same information. It's just worded a little differently. I felt it was necessary or good to show you the SQL portion or the SQL portion simply because if you ever find yourself in an environment where you have to write SQL or SQL code, you'll at least say that, hey, I've seen that before. Or I remember that vaguely at some point. So at least you've seen it, you're a little familiar with it, and if you'd like to go any farther with that, if that interests you, please, again, Like I said earlier, don't hesitate to give me a call because I'm more than happy to help you out with Microsoft Access, Excel, or any of the big box database systems, Oracle, SQL Server, DB2. I'll be more than happy to help you out. Now, getting back to finish our PowerPoints really quick, formatting our data sheets, the things you can do when you're formatting your data sheets are change the font size, the font facing, the colors, and the grid lines. You cannot add a custom header, footer, any images, or subtotals. Keep that in mind. You cannot add headers, footers, images, or subtotals. An example of what you can use to edit your data sheet is inside of your datasheet table tool, and I'll show you that in just a few seconds. Going back to our setup here, looking at our data sheet, we can database, and now we can make changes. So we can say, make all of that 11. I want the theming color to be yellow. Change it to Microsoft Sans Serif and bold it. Notice I couldn't add an image, I couldn't add a header or footer or any other counts. But I can make just the basic changes. So keep that in mind. So we did talk about creating queries. We talked about how to use tables or other queries to filter or view your data. And I also mentioned at the very beginning of the course or the very beginning of the class that creating a query allows us to answer questions about our data. It tells us what we've chosen and it displays it back. Then it allows us to filter our data temporarily or permanently depending on if we want to save our objects.